Hi, I'm Tom Tuban, and I work with the ARIS team on strategic partnerships. And I'm also the Chief Workforce Development Officer for the BioMade National Network for Manufacturing Institutes. I'm honored to serve as a moderator for our afternoon plenary. We wish to thank the Michigan University Outreach and Engagement Office for their sponsorship of this session. The last 3 days of the ARIS RIC Summit have been inspiring, with an all-star cast of speakers that have showcased resources, projects, initiatives to help us better understand and define the intersectionality of workforce, research impacts, and public engagement. This session on the NSF Convergence Accelerator highlights an incredibly innovative and transformative initiative to address our emerging workforce needs. It's with great pleasure that I introduce our afternoon presenters, Dr. Linda Mulnar and Dr. Robbie Robson. Dr. Linda Mulnar is a scientist and entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience in the life science and chemical industries, integrating her scientific, international, and government and business environments. Currently, Linda is a program director for the NSF Convergence Accelerator program in the Office of Integrated Activities at the U.S. National Science Foundation. Previously, Linda served as a program director in the NSF Engineering Directorate in the Division of Industrial Innovation and Partnerships, where she managed a portfolio of Phase 1 and Phase 2 small business innovation research and small business tech transfer grants. She also served on the working group for the NSF Emerging Frontiers and Research and Innovation Programs, or EFRI, which provides critical strategic support of fundamental discoveries at the frontiers of engineering, research, and education. Dr. Mulnar holds a PhD in polymer science and technology from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a BS in chemistry from the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome, Dr. Mulnar, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
We are also very pleased to have Dr. Robby Robson with us. And Dr. Robson is currently the CEO of Eduworks Corporation and the principal investigator of Skillsync, which is an NSF-funded initiative that will help to meet the skills demand created by digital transformation. Dr. Robson has served as a PI on multiple Department of Defense and NSF projects that apply natural language processing and machine learning to automatically organize, analyze, and transform learning content. He was a co-founder for one of the first and still highly successful RU programs in mathematics, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. Among his numerous responsibilities, he has contributed to multiple technology standards and currently serves as a tech advisor committee for the Lumina Credential Transparency Initiative. Dr. Robson received his doctorate degree in mathematics from Stanford and holds a bachelor's degree from Hampshire College. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Robson.
It's my pleasure.
Let's turn our attention to finding out more about the NSF Convergence Accelerator and Skillsync. So without further ado, Linda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll start sharing my screen and I'll stop my video. There. All right. Well, first, I really want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak here today, and also my colleague, Robbie Robson. It's my pleasure to tell you about some of the work we're doing at the National Science Foundation on accelerating convergent future of work solutions for societal impact. I'm Linda Mulnar, and I'm a program director of the NSF Convergence Accelerator. First, I'm going to tell you broadly, the NSF mission, NSF is quite unique with respect to other federal agencies in that we, instead of having a stated top-down mission like DOE or DOD, we have a very broad mission to promote the progress of science to advance national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure national defense. So that can be related to many, many different areas. And the vision is really to have a nation that can capitalize on these new concepts in science and engineering that we've supported and provide global leadership in advancing research and education. Last June, we had a new director, Dr. Panchanathan, and we're really thrilled to have him because he has just this amazing vision that he shares so broadly with everyone. And his vision is really threefold. It's to advance the frontiers of research into the future, of course, because that's what we do at the NSF, but also it's part of his vision to ensure accessibility and inclusivity in the work that we do at the NSF. And he has this term that he uses called the missing millions. You know, it's really time that we start using the whole team. We need to make sure that women and underrepresented minorities and disadvantaged groups are able to fully participate in the scientific mission and share in the prosperity that can come from that. And of course, the third aspect of our vision is to secure global leadership. And so how do we intend to do this? You know, Dr. Panchanathan talks a lot about doing things at both speed and scale. And there are several aspects to this. First, the people are very important, again, in being inclusive and providing accessibility. Partnerships are extremely important to the National Science Foundation right now. We're partnering across federal agencies, with industries and across other sectors in order to be able to move more quickly and to have impact at a larger scale. We also have a renewed focus on translation, or what we call transition to practice, in which we really need to think about the big problems that are facing society today and how we might be able to address them with science and engineering. Our previous director, Dr. Franz Cordova, talked a lot about convergence research and really spearheaded these ideas, you know, and the premise that, you know, today's grand challenges will not be solved by one discipline working alone. So we really need to merge ideas, approaches, and technologies from seemingly disparate fields in order to stimulate innovation and discovery. And then from that convergence research was grown the NSF Convergence Accelerator, which is a relatively new program. And the focus is to accelerate solutions towards societal impact. And the difference from the rest of NSF, in that most of the rest of NSF funds what we call fundamental research, the Convergence Accelerator is focused on what we call use-inspired research, where we look at to address national scale societal challenges. And so this vision is that not only is it convergence research across disciplines, but across sectors and other stakeholders to provide these very high impact results. And so the Convergence Accelerator is actually disrupting the usual way of NSF doing business. And we're using a new innovation model where we expand and diversify the teams that we use so that we can have characteristics of these programs where there are clear goals and milestones and high impact deliverables. So we leverage these multidisciplinary teams and we proactively and intentionally manage these awards. So unlike typical NSF awards, that have single PIs or teams of PIs that meet once a year at an annual PI meeting, we manage these teams as cohorts and tracks, and we encourage cooperation and competition. And we're going to tell you more about how we integrate the tracks and work together. So the program structure for the Convergence Accelerator has 3 phases. The first is an ideation phase, which I encourage you all to get involved in. We're going to give you some more information about that at the end of the session. And that's where this is something NSF does really well, because we engage with the community to understand what the community sees as being important to do research on and where the community's focus with. And that ends in resulting in these very creative programs that NSF has developed over the years. And so we use that sort of ideation phase in the Convergence Accelerator to identify topics that meet a societal need at scale and that are ready to build upon already completed foundational research. And then we can accelerate that convergence research to provide impact. And so we're constantly looking for these new ideas. So I encourage you to get involved in that phase. For those topics that are chosen, we publish solicitations that have phase 1 and phase 2 components. Phase 1 is a $750,000 planning grant over a period of 9 months. And within that planning grant, we incorporate a lot of hands-on innovation curriculum, and we work to help teams develop initial low-fidelity prototypes that can be tested with end users and either further developed and perhaps potentially commercialized, or provide information that can spawn new areas of fundamental research and innovation that need to be pursued to solve big societal problems. And then in phase 2, from this planning phase where we build out the teams more with additional partners and stakeholders, in phase 2, we go into implementation. So in the first pilot of our program, we down selected from 20 or so teams into 4 or 5 phase 2 teams that are up to 5 million awards over 24 months. And that's where we actually develop solution prototypes and work towards a sustainability model to continue impact beyond NSF support. And so the idea for each track for the Convergence Accelerator is that it becomes sustainable, and the work that's done by these teams is integrated and continues on after the NSF funding. So while we've had, let's see, 4 tracks so far, the initial track, the pilot 2019 cohort, had a future of work track, track B, that I run. We also had a track A, but to focus on the topic for folks here, track B had 2 components to it. First, artificial intelligence and future jobs, and also the building of a national talent ecosystem. And so really focused on the future of work at the human technology frontier and how that's affecting jobs, how that's affecting employees and employers, and how it's affecting our ability to be competitive economically, and also global competition and how we compete by building a STEM talent in a changing workforce. And so from these teams that were funded, these are the teams represented here. And again, we look at the future of work from these different perspectives, from the prospective employee, the prospective employer, and also education and training. And we funded 4 teams that address these different areas. And so what we're going to talk about next, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Robson to talk about his team, which is Skillsync, that looks at worker and work matching. So Robbie, I'll advance to the next slide if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Linda. So what I'm going to talk about is this Skillsync project, and I'll start at the top and get down to some of the details. But I also want to emphasize a few of the things that Linda mentioned, which is that what you're seeing here is after a phase 1 project where we did a lot of twisting and turning and pivoting from our original ideas, based on a lot of workshops that we held and based on focus groups. And that continued through phase 2. So a lot of the work that you're seeing here is the result of spending quite a bit of time with end users. And in our case, the end users were companies and colleges. So let me give you a little of the background. So our goal, written large, is to reskill and upskill workers. And there are 3 E words there: efficiently, which is something that industry wants very much; effectively, which is something that is important; and also equitably. And in doing so, when we started our sort of this journey, what we discovered was that companies have the need for this reskilling and often turn to local colleges. In fact, there is a surprising lack of mobility in the US workforce today. People tend to stay put. So it's very natural for them to turn to their local colleges and particularly professional development and continuing education offices to get this training for their workers. And when they do so, they have a problem. If you could go to the next slide. Could advance the slide? Oh, there, thank you so much. Is that it turns out that this process of companies working and finding local college training opportunities is almost completely manual. It's phone calls. It's a lot of back and forth. And also there's some pretty amazing communication gaps. Companies, for example, they talk about skills and colleges talk about degrees. The time frames are different. And we just are in the process of trying out the app that you're about to see. And we had the pleasure of asking companies how long they thought a training program it took to develop a training program, and asking their sort of college continuing professional development counterparts how long it took. One answered a matter of days, and the other answered a matter of months. And these are the kinds of things that we run into. So the question is, how do we solve this real world problem, and how do we do so in a way that's going to benefit workers in particular? So if we go to the next slide, what we came up with is this product. It's an application. It's also a lot of underlying technologies called Skillsync. And I'm not going to go through this list of organizations here, but just to emphasize one of the points that Linda made about the Convergence Accelerator, we have a lot of partners. The ones in red there are sort of our core partnership, and they range from organizations like the Credential Engine that looks at as a registry of credentials, a national registry of credentials, to universities who are helping with research, to companies and to workforce agencies and so forth. So let's go on to the next slide. So what is Skillsync? So this is just a very, very high level view of it. The way that Skillsync works is that it allows companies to issue what are called training requests. And these training requests are formulated in terms of the knowledge, skills, and abilities. We call those KSAs sometimes, or skills that they require in order to upskill their workers. They identify those. And in the process, as I'll talk about shortly, they have access to the skills that are being used and that are trending at a national level. They then formulate these requests, pass these on to colleges, who then can search through their offerings and also through other national offerings. So for example, two of our partners are Udacity and LibreText. LibreText has open educational resources. Udacity, I think most of you know, is an online provider. They can look at their own offerings and these other offerings and put together a training proposal, which they then send back to the college. And in doing so, we help them understand how well the courses, and more to the point, pieces of courses, modules, actually match the skills and knowledge and ability that the company needs. So this is the general flow. And if we go to the next slide, behind this, there is a lot of technology and also a lot of participatory research, sociology, in order to figure out what the user needs are. So these are the various inputs into this, and these include skills frameworks, which come from sources like the Department of Labor, national sources, things, and also those that we've extracted from company job descriptions. So we have access to literally millions of syllabi and job descriptions and things like that that we're analyzing using natural language processing, machine learning. There's some underlying technology and research that's being developed. There's also a virtual coach. Some of you may have heard of one called Jill Watson, which was developed at Georgia Tech at the Georgia by Ashok Goel, who's one of our partners. This was originally based on IBM Watson technology, is moving somewhat away from that, and was used as a virtual teaching assistant. We're not using it that way. We're using it in different ways to help users understand and interact with the application. And we generated something called an alignment score. And this was really our phase one innovation, was the notion that in order to help colleges and other training providers understand how well things matched up, we needed to give them an easy way to do that. And that's done through literally a single number that between 0 and 100, as it is now, that indicates how well a set of offerings matches a training request. So this is, again, another piece of sort of underlying research that's being used in this application. So that's where, that's a kind of description of Skillsync. And I think with that, we'll turn things back over to you, Linda, to talk about some of the Track B integration pieces.
Thank you, Robbie. That was great to hear more about Skillsync. And that app is actually instrumental in doing what we call track integration and working towards sustainability. So, Skillsync working with the other NSF Phase 2 funded teams in the Convergence Accelerator Future of Work topic. But also, we'd like to engage the audience on the potential for partnerships, more broadly with what we're doing with track integration and Future of Work. So I'm actually going to stop sharing the slides at this point and come back on video with Robbie so that we can have, and Tom, so we can have some discussion around what we've presented, because I think having this more interactive will be more valuable for the audience.
Well, I have to say, Linda and Robbie, thank you so much for that presentation. The information that you provided about Skillsync and about the Convergence Accelerator is absolutely invaluable. Great resources, and I can already figure tons of ways to think about how to building great and strong partnerships based on what you guys presented. I'm going to pull back just a little bit because we have a couple of questions that came up in the chat box that some of the participants are asking about, and I think that'll help to kind of lead into the next level of discussion. And one is a really basic question, but really an important one. And it's about gathering input from the community. Exactly what does that look like, and what communities are being providing that input that you're gathering and helping to inform these projects?
Actually, Robbie, I'll let you take that one if you want to speak specifically to the Skillsync.
I'm sorry, Robbie, I think that your microphone is on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, so, Linda talked about use-inspired research, and I think this is really, this really gets to that. So a lot of our organizations that we are partnering with represent broad communities ranging from the professional associations for that provide continuing education and professional development, UPSEA and CALE, if you're familiar with those, to the Business Higher Education Forum, which works with both businesses and higher education to match them up. We've also spent quite a lot of time with specific companies, and by the way, the companies that we've worked directly with are we're now going through our first real trial of Skillsync. The two of them are Southwire, which is probably many of you haven't heard of, which is the nation's, I think this is correct, the nation's largest wire manufacturer, and then a company called Halstead, which does floor covering. So these are in the manufacturing. These are not, we're not working with necessarily the high tech companies, et cetera. And the colleges range from community colleges to sort of four-year colleges to universities. So we've been going out to those communities. We've gotten input from the people that work in HR and who are responsible for hiring for these kinds of companies, and the particular communities is in the Atlanta area and in West Georgia, as our first first set of trials. So that kind of gives you an idea of the breadth of who we're working with.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, just to mention one of the other teams, phase 2 teams in track B, that's working with emergency responders, and so they work broadly with their community. PIs based at Texas A&M University, and they work closely with the Texas Engineering Experimental Station, TEEX, to access emergency responders for low fidelity prototype testing.
And I'll also add to that, since you mentioned that, one of the other ones is working with neurodiverse populations, with people on the autism spectrum syndrome, and that's a really, both of those are really fascinating projects that we're working with closely. And I will say that all of the PIs in this, we talk a lot. We're working together, and we're talking about how we can take skills and bring them together for all the projects, and how the training is relevant for all of them. So we're trying to work across all of these kinds of communities.
So it's really apparent how important these partnerships are and how closely aligned they are to the NSF report that was published just a few years ago for the workforce, and suggestions of creating those partnerships and leveraging the portfolio for federal programs. So it's great to hear, and great to hear also about the level of engagement for all of these different groups, including the neurodiverse groups, as well as industry partnerships, community colleges, and four-year institutions, and they're all coming together, which would make a lot of sense, as this is a convergence accelerator. So this is an awesome way to fuel that creativity and innovation. I have a question that just came in from the audience, and if you wouldn't mind, I'll just read it right off, and you can take this and field this one. It's a great question. So Do you feel that academic incentives like tenure processes appropriately account for convergence work? What advice would you give to faculty navigating interdisciplinary collaborative work and tenure?
Well, so this is really where the rubber hits the road, right? So what we're hearing in the current administration from, Dr. Punch Jonathan at NSF, there's a very clear vision what we want folks to do, increasing, partnerships and trying to move at speed and scale. And so, a big aspect of the Convergence Accelerator is this curriculum that we offer to try and bridge this gap from like where folks are in an academic institution and how they can meet this vision, right, of solving these big societal problems, one of which is, of course, future of work. And so, there is an ever-changing dynamic in higher education right now where, more credit is being given for things like patents or having a startup company, and that's slowly happening. But I do believe that if we can manage this in the academic environment, that the younger faculty, the students, the postdocs, this interaction with industry and end users is going to be absolutely invaluable for them in their careers. They're not all going to go into academia, so I do think we need to better serve these communities and different student groups at different levels to provide more opportunities for them moving forward. In terms of the actual tenure, this is being disrupted right now, but I think that historically has been difficult and it needs to be disrupted so we can move forward in new directions and new focus. Robbie, what do you see in terms of, because I'm sure you see this disconnect between education, what's offered in education, and then what folks in industry are looking for in terms of skills and for jobs.
Yeah, I do. And I think, so when we describe Skillsync, you'll notice that we talked a lot about continuing education and professional development, which is really outside of the mainstream of the research, certainly in research universities and R1s. And it's also interesting even there, how far outside it is. One of the things we've discovered is that they don't even use the same backend system. So they don't use the same technology to manage their catalogs and things like that. It's really fascinating how different those worlds are, at least in some of the cases that we've seen. On the mainstream side, we do work with the sort of core parts of universities, and there's a lot of opportunities for university faculty to get involved in doing research for industry. And in fact, in sort of one of my other lives, I'm active in the IEEE, and we see there more and more of industry, and big industry, coming and looking to academia to perform that basic research, and so they're looking for those kinds of partnerships. So I as far as how that plays into the P&T, promotion and tenure, as Linda said, that's an ever-changing landscape, and it is being disrupted. And in my personal experience, which is just maybe N of maybe 5 to 10, it's really all over the map. It varies so much from university to university as to how P&T committees look at patents and research and other kinds of what the NSF would call products, so as opposed to simply publications.
And I've worked with a lot of faculty who have ideas that they have aspirations of working towards commercialization and participating in entrepreneurship and startups and things. And I think it's really a personal choice of what the faculty want to do. And I think universities should make both of those options available. So you really need a portfolio of different folks in the university, some who are really focused on the fundamental research and producing students and publications, and then a spectrum of folks that then perhaps participate more with industry partnerships or are more entrepreneurial. And a value could be given to both of those, especially in the case of women and underrepresented minorities who, there are only so many hours in the day to participate and be tenured faculty and have a startup and industry partnerships, et cetera. So to really think about perhaps just placing some more value on having some folks in the community more involved with industry.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Robbie. I have another question. To be honest with you, there's such a number of questions that are rolling in from the group. I think that this is a really dynamic group and everyone's engaged here. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask another question that's coming in from the participant pool here. And it has to do with diversity. So gathering input may be different than shared understanding, elevating community voices, and promoting co-creation of knowledge with partners. Can you speak to the dynamics of trust between higher education institutions, partners, and diverse groups?
Yeah. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I will say that there is the trust is certainly an issue. Okay, and I mean, in some sense, that's one of the issues that we're trying to address. And one of the things that let me give you a little bit of some of the underlying technology that we're using. And I don't know if this is going to address your question at all, but I'll try. Okay, and just to explain some sort of the issues that we're facing. So one of them, for example, is, and this is from the industry side to academia, is that we're interested in understanding what skill trends exist at the national scale. So what's starting to be important if you're in a manufacturing community, or if you want to get into leadership or whatever. Those data are being drawn from job postings. The job postings, the companies that don't want people to understand necessarily what skills they're looking for, because that's competitive, and that can be competitive information. And so, one of the, for example, highly technical challenges that we have is removing what we call company identifiable information as opposed to personally identified information. So we call it CII, from these postings, so that we can aggregate these data. So that's just kind of an example. Then when we go to the colleges and they're looking at what are companies asking for, and often they're not asking for things that make any sense to them. They're asking for skills or for quick fixes that just are outside of the way that they think. So we have a lot of translation to do, and quite frankly, I think a lot of the trust issues. I mean, there are real trust issues of, are we going to actually do anything for underrepresented minorities? And are we actually going to, do something for women, because the statistics are pretty bad in a lot of these areas. But one of the things, so those are kinds of big social issues. But at the sort of things that we can actually address, part of the idea is that we can be transparent and talk to both industry and communities and academics in terms of underlying, what we call, as I said earlier, skills, as opposed to things like degrees and credentials and qualifications, which tend to be really based on your, economic, socioeconomic background as to what kind of degrees, what colleges, how strong your signals are in the workforce. And one of the things we're trying to do is to reduce that to a language that can be understood across all of those, so that there can be some trust built up.
I like that idea of that common language. I think that we hear that all throughout when we talk about other projects as well. And so just get on that even playing field where where we have that common language. I'm sorry, Linda, please.
I was going to say, diversity and inclusion, of course, very, very important to NSF, and NSF very forward thinking in these areas. And I would say generally in programs, to bring together folks from different groups, bring them together as equal partners in the beginning of development of new technologies or new opportunities, and making those opportunities accessible to everyone is something that we think about a lot. And also because we have this focus on partnerships right now, to think through very carefully the folks that we do partner with and make sure that our missions are aligned in terms of diversity and inclusion.
Thanks, Linda. You mentioned in the slideshow one of my favorite terms. I just seem to, I can't get this out of my mind. It's disruptive innovation. And this is one of the hallmarks of the Convergence Accelerator. And I'm wondering if you could share with us and our audience something that you think. I mean, there are tons that have already been mentioned, but maybe some things that rise to the very top about what you feel are the unique features of the Convergence Accelerator.
So it's really not business as usual. I think it's quite a surprise for some folks who've been funded by NSF before when we present principal investigators with a curriculum and we expect folks to cooperate and compete against each other in this sort of environment. One thing that's really different for sure is that our products are no longer focused on simply graduating students and publications, right? We want deliverables. And I think what's really exciting about the Convergence Accelerator in terms of disruptive innovation is that there truly is this virtual cycle created when you're doing fundamental research and then you begin to do use-inspired fundamental research. So when you really try to use some sort of scientific or technology capability, then you really see where its potential for further commercialization may lie or where its limitations may lie. And those limitations then can result in real disruptive innovation in terms of leading us down these paths of more exciting areas of fundamental research that can then be factored back in to the research and move things forward towards transition to practice and commercialization. So it's truly a virtuous cycle. And just to sort of go back to the other question, I think there's someone for everyone at the table, the folks who want to continue to do fundamental research or basic research and only focus on that. That's fine. Perhaps just do some use-inspired research to bring in some disruptive innovation to what you're doing, and also provide opportunities for folks to participate in entrepreneurship and commercialization activities.
Thank you. Thank you for that really, really comprehensive answer. I'm going to swing back into the chat box because there's a really good question that just popped up as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it for you. One of the things I love about the Convergence Accelerator is a requirement for research teams to discuss what they will deliver to the American people at the end of the project. How do you see this related to the broader impacts criterion?
I think we finally have much more focus on broader impacts than perhaps we have historically, and we're giving that much more weight, in funding decisions. But in terms of deliverables in a 3-year timeframe, Robbie, maybe since you've been successful in a phase 1 and phase 2, maybe it would help folks to have a couple of examples of what some of those deliverables would be.
Yeah, so I mean, there are one thing I will say, especially since there are a lot of people here from higher ed, is that not all the deliverables are products. So there's a combination of basic research and generalizable research, which is important. So like in our case, we're looking at things like, for example, how we avoid bias in AI, in the underlying AI and things like that. And, what role does the artificial intelligence play in helping people understand reskilling problems, et cetera. So these are sort of generalizable questions, and then on up to how many, our deliverables are, and our criteria are, how many people are we going to reskill? How is it going to work in the end? If we build products and in the end, what happens is nobody uses them. We've just spent a lot of money and no insult intended, for an academic exercise. And you can publish research papers, but that's not what this is about. And in particular, some of our deliverables are pathways to success and are data that will be used by organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that have something called the T3 Innovation Network that is looking at sort of much more general American pipeline problems, and there's data that we're providing that others can use. The National Labor Exchange can use the data that we are extracting from jobs, as well as, of course, our product, the Skillsync itself. And so the criterion that we're being measured by are, what do we do for workers, which is kind of number one. how do we contribute to AI, which is, you know, a basic research thing, and what do we contribute to, you know, talent pipeline development writ large, and that's, you know, so those are sort of the three main criteria. And in our, you know, in our reviews and in our presentations, and when, you know, visiting committees come and so forth, those are the things that we need to focus on.
Thanks, Robbie. I have a question for you, and it has to do with the flow of information in our meeting and our summit. So when we look through the themes that we presented for the past few days in our summit, what you're doing in Track B is especially suited for increasing diversity in STEM careers. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about that and just give us a little bit more details? Because I think that that's something that a lot of the folks that are part of this meeting are very interested in.
Sure. I don't know, Linda, if you want to take that, but I'll mention something a couple things. So first of all, we are focusing, interestingly, when we started our sort of this journey, and we thought, you know, what areas are we going to reskill in? Okay. You know, the first ones that we actually selected were STEM areas and, you know, things that have to do with advanced manufacturing and things like that. There's actually a lot of data that says that, you know, the economic well-being of communities depends on not only on STEM skills, but also on what are called soft skills. And as it turns out, our first focus is, and this may be disappointing, is not on STEM skills as much as on leadership skills and moving people into living wage jobs from, you know, from non-living wage jobs. So entry-level supervisors. And this was, this was, by the way, information that we got from companies that are very much in the STEM areas. I mean, companies like, you know, Accenture and others like that. I'm blanking on a lot of the names right now, but that, you know, we got through by asking, you know, what do you need and what do you want? And this is where they focused. That said, there's still a lot of the skills that are requested are in fact technical skills. And so, you know, I think there's as much as industry or companies want technical skills, we need to be able to communicate those. But they're not trying to ask, you know, does somebody take a calculus course? That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to find those sort of basic STEM skills that combined with soft skills allow people to advance in their work. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what we see.
It does. And Robbie, I'm curious, it's just a really quick follow-up, and maybe Linda, you can comment on this one as well. There are a number of directorates for NSF that have overlapping products that are being put out there, and one including the NSF and the ATE, Advanced Technological Education, that deals with a lot of the SKA, skills, knowledge, and abilities. Can you comment on, you know, since this is all about partnerships as well, can you make any comments as to ways to interact with these other areas of NSF, or perhaps you know, other partners to help promote that idea of developing that workforce piece?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I encourage everyone, you know, to get on the mailing list for NSF. You know, when you get those emails that just say what the different solicitations are and what we're looking to fund and areas that were of interest that we have, it's a great way to look at trajectory. And we do spend a lot of time on the topics that we choose to fund, and we engage with the community to do that. So I think that's super important. I'll just give an example. I was very fortunate in leading the Future of Work topic for the Convergence Accelerator, because Future of Work, the Human Technology Frontier, was one of the NSF 10 big ideas. So from 2017, NSF had been funding what we call core research programs, planning grants and research grants in Future of Work at the Human Technology Frontier area. And so that sort of emerged to become sort of ripe for a Convergence Accelerator topic, just like other topics emerged from HDR, Harnessing the Data Revolution, NSF big idea. So I sit also in the working group for that core research topic area. We just closed a solicitation that we're reviewing now, but we have already funded projects, and there's a vision. We collaborate together They see what I'm doing in the Convergence Accelerator. I can be tapped into the core research programs. In our most recent solicitation, NSF 21-548, we also developed a new topic. So originally we had research and planning grants. Now we have a new research area called Transition to Scale. And the purpose of that new subtopic is exactly to help fundamental researchers get some of the tools and skills to start thinking about transition to practice. So we realized we needed sort of other programs to help support this mission of, increased partnerships and transition to practice. So we do, try to work, broadly across the NSF. There's always going to be some overlap, which I think is great because we don't want there to be any gaps. And, I look forward to engaging with folks in the community on, where we go next. And the Convergence Accelerator offers opportunities to do that.
Linda, thanks for that. And I think that you kind of answered a question that popped up in the chat box, but I'll read the question anyway, see if there's anything else that you might want to add to this one. And it's, how does a Convergence Accelerator agenda align with the NSF mission of conducting basic research? Or is it a new direction for NSF?
I think it's both. It's a new direction for sure. We haven't had a program like this before. And so it's a new thing. But I see them as being absolutely synergistic. What I'd said before, there's a virtuous cycle. When you really start to try and use a technology and you're speaking to users and you have low fidelity prototypes, you are going to gain such valuable information about where the gaps are in the fundamental science and research that we need to pursue to really solve some of these big problems. So I just think it's absolutely exciting. I'll go back to like what I was saying about higher education. If you have a portfolio of professors, right, and academic researchers, some of whom are very focused on fundamental research, to the other end of the spectrum, folks who may be more entrepreneurial and start companies, we need that same thing happening at NSF, where we have programs that span this spectrum so that we can help support researchers all along this path from basic research to commercialization. And, I always used to say when I would give talks to PIs at academic institutions, well, why would you want to leave this lovely place over here where there's tons of money for fundamental research and you can just keep doing that? Why try and traverse, and go into commercialization? But it's because of broader impacts. It's so that the technology you develop can be used by people all over the world, right? So I think that's what's super exciting about the work we're doing now.
Tom, I'll also add, I'm someone who's been in both worlds, and it's fascinating to me because I think in academia there's been a traditional emphasis on what I would call proprietary research and open products. So the research is yours, and you don't want anyone else to duplicate it until you've published, and once it's published, you want it to be used and disseminated. In industry, it's just the opposite. Industry likes to collaborate on research, but then build proprietary products that they can then sell and monetize and sustain. And one of the things that NSF, in my experience, and we were involved in the National Science Digital Library when that was going on, and in cyber learning and so forth, that they've always struggled with, I think, and this is, I'm not part of NSF outside perspective, is that in order to have that broader impact, you actually need sustainable products. And from a researcher's perspective, once the research is done, and then it's, quote, just a matter of programming, it becomes nothing that gets rewarded. The Convergence Accelerator has really turned that to a point where there is value in and rewards in the sort of application and actually the impact. And I think that's really, for me, it's a great program. I have to say it's pretty unique, and it's something that's quite different, and I think is really good.
So I have my little spin on a question that just popped up, and let me see if I can get this framed right. And this has to do a little bit more with the misalignment between education and the skills required for STEM jobs. Can you comment on that in terms of what the Convergence Accelerator is doing to help realign that, to ensure that the skills that are being presented are aligned or matched up with those that are required for our industries to help promote those jobs that are out there, the high tech, especially those that are in the emerging technology space, because it's very difficult to identify what those SKAs are in the field that's just absolutely on the cutting edge.
Sure. I mean, I'll let Linda answer that generally, and maybe then. So go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say a couple. You're really getting an education here, right? And so, you know, in transforming education. So that's a really big topic, right? I actually am holding a upcoming workshop. One of our 12 funded workshops this round is on education and reimagining STEM education. And that's going to be held. I can make sure the folks in the audience, I know Robbie's going to participate in that. And we hope that will become a new Convergence Accelerator topic. So I think that's a very, very big area to look at. But making this connection, we're aware of this gap and how to fill that and sort of transform education and what we can do in the near term and the middle term and the long term. I think some of that gets to the types of platforms that Robbie's developing, right? So we can start to identify what these needed skills are. What we do in each track of the Convergence Accelerator is have a subtopic on education and workforce development. And this started with track C on quantum technology. So we have a quantum smart workforce subtopic in that track where we're specifically looking at developing new educational opportunities. So I think that's one way that folks in this audience can think about engaging with the Convergence Accelerator moving forward, even if there's not a topic specifically related to future of work or education. But we recognize that, and we need to make these opportunities, these cutting edge areas of research that are going to produce, high paying jobs. We need to make that equitably accessible to folks.
Yeah, so I'll also maybe talk a little bit about some of the other projects that are in this track, because I think they're relevant to that question. So, we mentioned the one that's working with neurodiversity, and there's an example where the project needs to identify exactly what those STEM skills are and advertise that this particular population may actually have high capabilities in those skills and why they should be valuable, to industry. And so that's one example. And another one, the one we mentioned, I think Linda briefly mentioned, is working with first responders. They're using some very innovative and very high-tech ways of training them, because they don't believe that first responders are going to stay, we're sort of jumping on trucks in suits, and that they're going to be using things like augmented and virtual reality. They're working with exoskeletons, which can help augment and amplify their strength and their agility and ability to respond to situations, etc. And so they're working with a lot of these advanced technologies and identifying the skills that are needed for that, and then creating new methods of training for them. So I hope I haven't misrepresented anything that one of the other projects is doing, but but it's these are some of the kinds of things. Another one is looking at VR and extended reality as a means to help manufacturing workers. So there's a lot of these kinds of advanced technologies that are being used to first identify the skills that are going to be needed as they interact with robots and with AI and with all these other things, and then figure out ways to train them.
Well, I'll tell you, for one, I'm blown away by this amount of information, and with all the tracks and the amount of work, which is really kind of pushing the envelope for innovation and transformative growth. We have one question, and Linda, I think that this question is going to help lead into your last few presentation slides. So I think that this is a question that we can leave open-ended and then just slip right into the slides, and that is, how can the impact community support the work of the Convergence Accelerator? What can they do? How can we get engaged, and how can we move forward? So with that, let's I guess open up.
Sure. We'll stop video and I'll go back to the slides. I have a few more things to share with the audience. So thank you.
Thank you.
So on this slide, I just want to tell you about, and I think I've mentioned, I hope, most of these throughout the presentation and the Q&A. So I encourage you to reach out to me or Robbie or the other PIs from the Phase 2 Track B teams in Future of Work. These teams are not stagnant. They are dynamic teams. We're constantly looking for ways to grow and make this integrated teamwork sustainable. So please do reach out for us to that. I've also highlighted here the workshop that I just mentioned. It's coming up at the end of May, May 25, 27, and June 3rd and 8th. We're having 4 3-hour session workshop looking at how we can reimagine STEM education. And the principal investigators for that workshop are at IBM. And so that's very interesting. It's an industry-led workshop on education. So really getting and addressing this gap between industry and education. We have a number of other workshops you may be interested in as well in areas listed here and detail given on our website. I also encourage you to mark your calendars for the Convergence Accelerator Expo. That would be, I think, a really fun way to interact with the teams and learn about what they're doing in different areas and different tracks for the Convergence Accelerator. And as a program director, I can't help but encourage you to be a reviewer for the Convergence Accelerator because, you know, providing your expertise not only helps us in our review process, but can help you should you be interested in applying to the Convergence Accelerator topic in the future. And I'll also mention here, this is a recent podcast that I completed, and this was actually with a PI from the ATE program that Tom mentioned. And so it's a Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work podcast series. And there I talk a bit more about Track B and also mention Skillsync and the other Track B Future of Work teams. So you might enjoy listening to that. And then just, you know, a big thank you to everyone with contact information for myself and Robbie Robson, and also, you know, websites for the Convergence Accelerator and for Skillsync. So I encourage you all to have a look at that and reach out and connect with us. So, did Robbie have anything he wanted to add to that for reaching out to Skillsync?
Yeah, just reach out to me. The website is we're still a little behind closed doors, so if you it gives you an opportunity to ask for some information, and we'd be, you know, happy to send it to you. And if you're interested in participating, and I can't see the audience from here, but if you're interested in participating in any of our trials or getting involved with us, please do send me an email either to the info@skillsync.com address or to me at eduworks.com. And we'd be happy to reach out to you. And there's also an expo that the NSF is putting on and coming up, I believe, and in July, is that?
Yes, that's listed here.
Yeah.
Yep, we have, I mentioned July 28-29 workshop.
Right, and if you come to that, you'll be able to see us, but also all of the other Track B teams and interact virtually through various kinds of mechanisms. It's quite I think they've done a really good job of that, and also express interest and get further contact information from all of the teams.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, great, Robbie and Linda. I've bookmarked the dates for July 28th to 29th to be at that Accelerator, the Convergence Accelerator Expo, and I encourage our participants and our meeting attendees to attend that as well. I'm looking forward to that because this is the information that you just gave us primes such great things that we can all participate in. So the Convergence Accelerator and the Skillsync really showcase the best of the best for ingenuity and innovation. And I appreciate you providing the information and spending this afternoon with us. So on behalf of ARIS and Rick and our participants, a very warm thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise. I think at this point in time, I'd like to turn your attention over now to Dr. Susan Reno and to Dr. David Phipps to help us with the closing session for our ARIS and Rick meeting. So Susan,
Hi,
go ahead. The floor
everybody.
is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Linda and Robbie, for a great session to end our conference. I'm excited. I feel like there's a lot of energy, and so I appreciate it and thank you for that. What a great conference. Although we couldn't be together in person, I feel like I've caught up with some old friends and I've made some new ones, and I look forward to being together in North Carolina for 2022. Be looking for the save the date coming out sometime soon. It's our 10th anniversary summit, so it's 10 years of getting together and talking about impact, and I cannot wait. All I will say is that there'll be lots of surprises, and it will definitely be a party. We want to thank our U.S. sponsors one more time: the National Science Foundation, ARIS, the Michigan State University Office of Outreach and Engagement. I'd like to thank the ARIS leadership team, our Council of Experts, the Conference Planning Committee. They did a really great job. The proposal reviewers, again, thank you for that. I have to really thank our MU Conference Office team. All the things that went smoothly, all the ways we transitioned in and out of sessions, all the information, that's thanks to our conference office, and we couldn't do it without them. And lastly, I want to thank our evaluation team. So they're wonderful. Please fill out the conference evaluation before you log off today. It'll just take a few minutes. That also helps us. And then I'd like to thank you for spending the last 3 days with us. I can't thank you enough for that. I hope that you found it as exciting and exhilarating as I have. And then the very last thing, a huge thank you to our colleagues at Research Impact Canada. We partner on so many things, but particularly for this conference. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, David Phipps.
Thank you, Susan, so much. This excellent conference. I love how it ended with Linda saying, and here's some more stuff you've got to do. You don't have to wait till 2022 in North Carolina. There's more stuff that's going to be happening. So thank you so much. I'm going to start out with my thank yous by thanking Susan, because your leadership of ARIS has brought us, enabled all of this to happen. I'd like to thank the Research Impact Canada operational team led by Connie Tang, and backed up by Sylvia, Helen, and Julie. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to thank the Canadian sponsors of this, the Conference Board of Canada and the Future Skills Center. But don't hang up yet. Susan, we got a thing to do.
Yes, we do. I'm about to share it right now.
Okay, so you have been putting some words in the word cloud. Not too many words, I'm noticing at this point. Susan, can people still put some words in the word cloud?
Absolutely. Go on menti.com and use the code 50539644. You can see it there at the top. There's also somewhere floating around a QR code. You might be able to find that on the attendee hub. So we would love for you to put how you're feeling right now into that little chat.
There is a link for Menti also within the description. So if you just scroll down, you'll see that website link directly where you can just click on it and go right into it.
Oh, I see lots. I see it moving.
Things are moving. It's exciting. So we can see certainly people are excited. People are inspired. You know what I don't see on here, Susan? And this is good. I don't see tired. So people aren't tired yet. We are really rocking the broader impacts, the knowledge mobilization and the research impact. So this is really good to see. So again, menti.com, code 50539644. Some people are happy, focused, exhausted. There you go. That's some of the exhausted folks. Inspired and excited are still some of the worst. Jory is cool. Jory, are you on right now? I don't think you can unmute, but just a shout out to Jory, because yeah, he's totally cool. Unless that's his mom online, but I don't think so. So way to go, Jory, for being cool. Refreshed, got some new ideas. That's awesome. That's awesome. If anyone is inspired, anyone who wrote inspired, go to the Q&A, if you would, and write down what has inspired you. And we've got a way of communicating that, and we're going to read that out, but tell us why you feel inspired right now. Use the Q&A, and then that's going to get populated into a chat where Susan and I can see that. So we're looking at appreciative, thoughtful, still inspired is the biggest word, with hopeful and excited and connected. Connected is a really important one for this work. We just heard about who in some of these accelerators and how we're making connections between research and the use of that research to enable impact. So connected is good, connected to each other as peers, but also connecting our research evidence to its ultimate use. And so people may be inspired, but you're not telling us why you're inspired. So if you have written inspired, please tell us why. Because honestly, I could keep doing this all night, but I know Susan doesn't want me to. Susan, do you have anything to say about these words that you're seeing?
You know what I think? I think it's just because we always feel like at the end of the summit that we have found our people, that we come away feeling like we have learned new things, and I would expect it to be nothing less. I like people are talking about being future oriented. I think this last session really helped us think about that. For me, the reasoning behind this theme was really to get us to think differently about how we do research impact and its ability to impact the future skills and future workforce. And I think that we are a really key part of that pipeline. So I'm excited about that. And I feel like that is really future oriented.
Nice, Susan. Courtney's shared with us that she's feeling connected with others that have the same passions and deal with the same challenges. Gives me inspiration to keep on fighting the good fight. And you know what, Courtney? It is a good fight. Sometimes it's a fight, sometimes it's a lot of fun, and sometimes fighting can be fun, as long as you've got the right ends in mind. So thank you for that. Therese Skriniars, apologies if that is wrong. Oh, Skynars, thank you. And says that she is inspired by the networking, validation, and the shared ideas and tools that I've learned these past 3 days. And thank you so much, Therese, for that. It's important, and this is where these spaces are all about sharing. Leah shares that she is inspired by the amazing work occurring in both countries. We're all making a difference in people's lives. It gives me new ideas. Absolutely, thank you, Leah, for that comment. And a question, I want to keep this motivation going. How else can I become involved in ARIS? Susan, I'm going to ask you to respond to this. How can I become involved in ARIS? How can I keep learning and connecting?
I love that question. Go to researchandsociety.org. That's our website. You can see where you can join our community. It's totally free to join. Lots of resources and activities. We have our training team does a lot of great things and offers webinars that'll be happening all summer. So there are lots of ways to be involved. We're always looking for volunteers. So absolutely, come on, we welcome you.
And I'm going to also invite you to be bilingual and speak Canadian English as well as American English. And you can come to researchimpact.ca, www.researchimpact.ca. You can sign up for our newsletter because you can have a Canadian English newsletter, an American English newsletter, Canadian webinars, American webinars, Canadian tools, and American tools are in the same spot. So at least for tools, you won't have to necessarily go to different places. We've got a comment. I'm just glad that we're not trying to convince anyone that a focus on impacts is worth the time and energy. That work is done. Welcome to your peeps. Thank you. And a sense of this collective group and the great work you are doing. She or he feels a sense of belonging. And that's kind of what Susan and I felt when we met. I did tell the story of this 3 days ago when we opened, that it was in Philadelphia, and kind of found that, we found our tribe, right? We found, because often a lot of us are solo operators and a lot of us work in individualized environments, and we come into these spaces for ARIS and for Research Impact Canada, and it really provides us opportunities to connect with other people, and we're not alone doing this. And thank you, Susan, who has shared that she feels a complete sense of belonging. So that's Susan Rowe. Sorry, I read Reno. Susan Rowe.
Susan is one of our ARIS fellows.
Excellent. I'm an hour later than Susan Reno is. A little punch here. Another comment: after the past year of disinformation and anti-science sentiment, it's exciting and inspiring to see so many people coming together under the common goal of more broad research impacts. Kirsten Sanford, thank you very much for that. Donald shares that he is inspired and looking forward to implementing new ideas and share the knowledge he has learned with his team. Excellent. And maybe next time, bring your team along with you, and then you can share and co-create with your team. Someone possibly from North Carolina says Durham, North Carolina rocks. Hope to see you all there next year. If you want to put your name to that so that we know your affiliation, we'd be happy. We do hope to see a lot of people in North Carolina next year. Thank you, Courtney, for thanking us. It has been our pleasure. Merci beaucoup pour ces contributions. Un comment en français, merci. That is, thank you very much for these contributions. We really appreciate that. En français et en anglais aussi. Susan, I will turn the final thoughts to you.
Oh, I hate to do it. I hate to do it. I hate to end it. But I need to remind you that the session recordings and poster information will be available on demand within the hub. So just as you've been in the hub all week, they'll be there for 60 days post-conference. So if you were in a session and didn't get to see another one, they'll be all available there for you to view. Thank you. I really do feel like I hate to say goodbye because we're wrapping it up. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for just all the things that you've done. I wish you nothing but happiness and well-being, and I can't wait to see everybody back in Durham next year. I'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.